Hello, and welcome to our second micro lesson on why to simplify your slides. A caveat before I begin. This micro lesson is not about simplifying your content. The topics we teach in higher education are complex, they are often difficult. In fact, the fundamental difficulty of what we teach can be necessary for learning. In fact, Robert Bjork in 1994 coined the phrase desirable difficulty. Appropriate challenge can be necessary for learning. Thus, the focus of this micro lesson is not on simplifying your content, but rather how we sometimes unintentionally make our slides too complex or too hard for students to find and process the needed information. If you recall, in our last lesson, we developed a model of memory, and to help understand this model, I gave you a series of words to remember. I blurred them here so you can still go back and try them if you want. But one of the key things this revealed was the idea that too much information overwhelms your working memory. This has been experimentally validated and is often referred to as Miller's Law. We can hold 7 plus or minus 2 things in our working memory. But it turns out what a thing is varies from person to person, or specifically between experts and novices. Here we have the working memory of a novice and an expert. The novice is easily overwhelmed by too much information, but the expert sees that information differently, chunking it into fewer items. Both are still limited by too much information, but the nature of what one chunk represents changes. This was studied experimentally by Chase and Simon. They conducted an experiment using a chessboard and chess pieces. They filled the chessboard, again like my list with too many pieces to remember, and asked both novices and experts to try to memorize the board. The novices performed as expected, remembering 7 plus or minus 2 pieces, perhaps a castle, a crown, a weird hat, and some other pieces. Again, this follows Miller's Law. However, when the experts were asked, it gets interesting. They could remember almost every piece, and that's because this isn't 28 random chunks of information, it's one piece of information. This is turn 23 of the 1994 Meyer versus Mueller match. The formation is the King's Indian attack. It's currently White's move, and chess fans consider this as the second most substantial move in chess history. You can follow along and see the game played at the link here. Thus, the key point is this game is only a few chunks of information for chess experts. But Chase and Simon didn't stop there. For the next phase, they filled the board with pieces in all kinds of random places, often illegal positions. Here we've put both kings in checkmate. We've put too many of some pieces on the board, and we've put pieces in places they can't get to. In this case, when Chase and Simon asked experts and novices to remember the board state, both groups could only recall 7 plus or minus 2 pieces. Because experts look at this and it makes no sense at all. None of their patterns work. It's a bunch of independent information. There is no way to chunk this. We can take this one step further and look at this board. It's the starting position. Here, even novices can probably remember all 32 pieces. But how do we apply this to slides? Well, a number of years ago, I was teaching a human factors course and I was using this graphic from Wickens at the start of every class. It was a 13-week course with 3 classes a week. Over the course of 39 classes, I showed this at the start of almost every class, and I would do things like change the color of certain portions to highlight them or highlight sections to show what we were working on. But we were about 3/4 of the way through the course, and I thought that though things were going really well, I was getting the feeling that students weren't quite getting some of the things I was talking about. They weren't quite making the connections I felt they should be making. So I told them I was going to have a pop quiz on the last day of the class, and I surprised them by doing it on the second to last day. All I asked them to do was draw this elegant diagram that I've showed them more than 30 times. And this is what the students drew. What's going on here is that the graphic on the left, to me, the expert is a single elegant model that represents all of the complexity of how we process information. It was 1 or 2 chunks of information to me. To the students, however, it was just another block diagram with many boxes and arrows, of which in engineering they probably see hundreds. It was not a single piece of information. How did I fix this? Well, instead of showing the entire diagram all at once, I would just show a few relevant pieces, like a portion of this initial diagram I showed you at the beginning, and teach to that. Then I would show other pieces and slowly connect these pieces over the course of the semester. And thus your takeaway for today's micro lesson is clear. When building slides, you need to consider how much new information is on the slide from the novice or student's perspective. This is really hard because you don't realize you're looking at that chessboard and you know without thinking how that game is evolving or all the intricacies of that model. But as an instructor, you have to put yourself back in the novice's perspective and not put all that information on one slide. Thanks for listening, and good luck on your teaching and learning journey. As always, your feedback and ideas are appreciated. Please click the like button, subscribe, and tell your friends to come join us.